afternoon questions and answers time, where you can interact with us with your questions and comments related to the Bible, and we'll try to respond as well as possible by going to the Bible. If you're
Okay, thank you, and we will open up the room to any questions or comments that you might have, and everyone is invited to share whatever on your mind. Please feel free, and you're welcome to make a comment or to ask a question. All right, let's go to the first person on the phones. Welcome to eBible's question and answer this Sunday afternoon.
Yes, definitely. Based on the lesson this morning, this afternoon I should say, you said May 21st, Christ finished all the work, and with Matthew 24:14 in mind, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end shall come. Could we get a better understanding now, based on what you was teaching this morning, with the prayer of Jesus in John 17? Look at verse 4.
John 17.
Verse 4. Actually, this whole prayer of Jesus would be taken into consideration. Maybe you can look at that and tie it into what you was teaching this morning. But, you know, this would look like, since Jesus has done everything, looks like now we can get a better understanding that maybe we are in this time period right now, as he's talking about how he's gave his word to the believers, and now, you know, we are maybe at this stage. I'm just wondering if this could be tied into what you was teaching this morning.
Well, we know that in Matthew 24, like you referred to, God indicates that the gospel of the kingdom will go into all the world for a witness unto all nations. And the word witness in the parallel gospel of Mark, the parallel account, is translated testimony against. And so God did send forth a testimony against, a witness to all men. Judgment day is coming, and the reason why so many despise that message is because that it indicated that men were sinners, they're not as good as they like to think, and that there is a judge to judge sin. And this is what most of the people in the world try to avoid and to get away from, and God made it so for the first time. I don't think there is anything comparable. For the first time in history, the whole world was confronted with that teaching from the Bible, that they are sinners, that they're guilty, and there's a judge who has pronounced the penalty, Judgment Day, and that's why there was such hostility to that message and such rejoicing when apparently, from their perspective, nothing happened. Now in John 17, let's read from verse 1 through 4. These words spake Jesus, and lifted up his eyes to heaven, and said, Father, the hour is come. Glorify thy Son, that thy Son also may glorify thee, as thou hast given him power over all flesh, that he should give eternal life to as many as thou hast given him. And this is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. I have glorified thee on the earth. I have finished the work which thou gavest me to do. And well, now the work, we read in Hebrews 4, verse 3, as far as the work of paying for the sins of the elect, was finished before the foundation of the world. It says in the last half of Hebrews 4:3, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. But there was another aspect to the work, which was to reveal it, and to make it manifest. And that was important to God. And so he had Jesus enter into the human race and live out his life and finally go to the cross. And so Jesus is finishing making manifest that work, and that's why this statement's made in John 17.
Right. Well, that's my point. That it was manifested, has been revealed now. He says, I have glorified thee on earth. I have finished the work which thou hast given me to do. And then goes on saying, now, O Father, glorify thou me with thine own self. I mean, I want you to read this when you get a chance to read the whole prayer. See what I'm saying? Because it looks like he's praying now that you keep us patient, keep us, because we've done the work, and we're not in the world, we're not of the world, and there's just so much here. If you get a chance to take a look at that, maybe comment on that maybe next week.
Okay, yeah, it's too much to read at this time, but yeah, I will take a look at that. Thank you. And thank you for bringing up these verses, and let's go to the next person on the phone lines. Please go ahead with your question.
Good afternoon, Chris. A blessed Lord's Day to you, brother. Thank you for your study today. Could Psalm 91, verses 7 and 8, be referring to the Judgment Day period that we're in right now?
Psalm 91 and verse 7 and 8. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Because thou hast made Jehovah, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. Well, see, with this, these verses, it could apply to this time, but I always try to find something that securely locks it in, and so there's no question. And so I would keep this verse in mind and try to find similar verses, because there's probably somewhere where God would add additional information. So I would say it, but I couldn't say for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing up those verses, and let's go to the next person on the phones. Welcome to eBible's Question and Answer. Hello? Hello? Is anyone there?
So are you able to hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good to speak with you again. Would you look at Solomon, chapter 2, please?
Song of Solomon?
Chapter 2, verses 11 and 12.
Okay, Song of Solomon 2 and 11 and 12, where it says, For lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear in the earth, the time of the singing of birds is come, and the voice of the turtle is heard in our land.
I'm thinking that the winter is reference to the Great Tribulation that has now ended, and the rain being a reference to the latter rains, which now also ended. And verse 12 would be a reference to God's elect during these days. What do you think?
Well, I can see why you would think that about verse 11. God does use winter as a picture of the Great Tribulation, and the rain would relate to the latter rain, which fell simultaneous with the last about 17 years of the Great Tribulation. And so when the winter has passed, so was the latter rain. So that seems to be clear. I haven't really worked on the rest of the verse, but we do find verse 13 has in view coming away at the end of the verse. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. And that could relate to the end of this period of time in the rapture. So it's very interesting in these verses, but I don't right now understand the reference to the flowers and the singing and the voice of the turtle. But I think there's a lot of interesting things about it. Thank you.
Thank you,
okay.
Chris, and continue feeding the sheep.
Well, thank you. Thank you for these verses again and for your comments. And let's go to the next person on the phones. Welcome to E-Bible Question and Answer.
Echo 2011 asks, in Micah 7 verse 5, what does the Lord mean when he says, trust ye not in a friend?
Micah 7:5. Trust ye not in a friend, put ye not confidence in a guide. Keep the doors of thy mouth from her that lieth in thy bosom. For the son dishonoreth the father, the daughter riseth up against her mother, the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own house. Well, God is just forewarning and letting us know that this is a very treacherous time, spiritually speaking, and we elsewhere the Bible says every brother will utterly supplant, and so we have to be careful about personal relationships with family, with friends, with respected individuals. We cannot trust. We cannot trust men. And of course the believer knows this, but you know it's very hard to live this because especially if we've gone some distance, if we've traveled along with individuals in the pilgrimage, of the gospel, as we've shared the gospel with others, and apparently we were so like-minded, and now perhaps some of those friends and some of those are even family members or others, and they are understanding what God is doing. Now this is true. We could look at various doctrines that God has opened up, and this has been true all along the way. For instance, when God opened up the information about the end of the church age, well, these verses were wise counsel. I remember we had some very good friends who were going to our church, the church that we had started, and then when we learned that the church age was over back in 2001, and we began to study it and began to realize this is the case, well, those very good friends didn't see it at all, and it got to the point where there was a break in the friendship because they went another way. And I say they went another way because the believer goes the way of the Bible, and the way of the Bible is always the right way, and so they decided to stay with the church, and they didn't listen to God. They didn't understand what He was saying, and so the temptation is, well, my friends or my family or this person I respect so highly, and I trust them, and I have trusted them, and look, they're thinking something else. They don't agree with this, and the temptation is to listen to man, to allow the weight of friendship or love to weigh more than the Word of God and what the Bible teaches. You know, that's like a scale at determining which way are we going to go. Now, I remember all kinds of people would constantly say about the end of the church age, well, this pastor and that pastor and the other pastor, they don't agree with this teaching. Very, very few pastors agree with this teaching. And what they were doing, and it's a big mistake, and it resulted in horrible spiritual consequences for them. What they were doing was weighing on one hand what these well-respected individuals said, and on the other hand, I hear what you're saying from the Bible. I hear what the Bible's saying. And they were troubled because they tended to give too much importance to what men are saying. And, you know, this is one of the reasons why God has allowed, I think, Family Radio at this time to teach opposite things than what the Bible is teaching, to go in a direction that is not the direction of the Bible. And it's God's permissive will, because this period of time is a time of intense testing of spiritual fire for the elect. And now the test is the elect, they listen to the voice of Christ. They hear His voice and know His voice. And so we do. We know that May 21 was just so solidly and perfectly locked in. It had to come from God. See how all these verses fit and pointed to May 21, and nothing has corrected them. We can see the verses we just looked at today and many more that indicate, like Jeremiah 25, what God is doing. And so we see all this, but on the other hand, here is the faithful and trusted ministry of Family Radio that God's people have listened to and been blessed by for so many years. and so now, you know, in a sense, we're in a similar situation as those individuals in the churches. Well, they listened to this pastor and that pastor, and they trusted, and they respected them, and they perhaps were blessed by them. And then it came to a point where God put them to the test. Well, who do you listen to? Do you listen to this doctor and to that respected theologian, or do you listen to me and my word? And the believer passes that kind of test easily, but now is a much more severe test where we have been blessed. We heard the word of Christ through the ministry of Family Radio, but you see, the test for the believer and the child of God follows a man, as the Apostle Paul says in the New Testament, follow me even as I am a follower of Christ. And the true believers follow a man to the point that that man is following Christ or the Word. And to the outside observer, it looks like we're following a man. But no, we were listening carefully for the voice of Christ. We heard it through the teaching of Mr. Camping for year after year after year. So we ended up checking out what he said, and we followed it because we saw he was following Christ or the Bible. And that's what the believer does. Now at this point, we're hearing something where we're pausing. It's not matching up with many things in the Bible. We're not, even those that are still going the other way, they're uneasy, they're unsure. It doesn't sound quite the same as it did before. And you see, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is the test that God has developed. it's the reason God has allowed these things to unfold the way they have. It makes the trial so much more difficult for the true believers, and yet God is going to be glorified, because the charge against his people was, well, they follow whatever a certain individual says. And no, God is of course, God knows that they only follow him. His people will always follow him. So God arranged things so that this will be the case, and the elect will sadly not go the route that is being laid out by even such a previously most faithful ministry in man. And it's possible for us to go astray. This is a difficult period. It's possible for us to be incorrect and to travel down the wrong road for a period of time. Excuse me. Well, anyway, so this is excellent counsel for every one of us from God. We should check out what we're hearing. We should not trust what anyone says, not our closest friend, not someone we've been in line with perfectly. Don't trust anyone, just the Bible. Well, thank you for that verse. And let's go to the next person. Welcome to our question and answer time.
Hi, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. I wonder if you could take a look at Revelation 9:18. With respect to the sun, moon, and the stars, we know the third part had to do with the churches, and then when God put those lights out on the whole world, it was the transition on May 21. Can you go over again how this verse, with talking about the third part, how that, what the timing of this verse is?
Yeah, well, it says in Revelation 9:18, this is referring to the 200 million. By these three was the third part of men killed by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. Excuse me. And the 200 million are representative of all God's elect, and the sum total of all that God would save, and now they're being loosed. If we go back to verse 14, it says, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the four angels or messengers which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And Euphrates is a synonym for Babylon, and this is indicating all those that were bound in the world, that they were in spiritual bondage of some sort, and then God saved all the elect, loosing them. And once he delivers them from this binding, which was completed on May 21, then they go forth as a huge host, is the way God is viewing it, and it's the same picture in Joel 2. And they are going forth with fire, smoke, and brimstone, destroying everything in its path as far as the world's concerned. But immediately on that day of May 21, they killed the third, representing all those that were in the churches and congregations, because we have to remember that anyone who remained in the church during the latter rain period could not have been saved. God was not saving in the church. There was a famine of hearing there, and someone had to come out of the church in order to hear the gospel and to be in a place potentially where God could save them. And anyone who remained, well, they couldn't be saved. And when God closed the door on the latter rain and the door of salvation, well, now those in the churches have no hope at all. And that's why it says that they were killed. But it goes on to speak of the rest of the men in verse 20, which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands. So that's in speaking of the people of the world. They weren't killed by the plague that came on the third part, and yet they're unsaved, and they're not repenting, which proves they're unsaved, and yet there is a slight hope for them that perhaps did save them, but there's no such hope for anyone who was in the church leading up to that day.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing up that verse and your question. And let's go to the next person on the phones. Welcome to our question and answer this Sunday afternoon.
Hello, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please go ahead.
Hello. I just want to say thank you. I'm a 16-year-old boy, and I've been listening to Family Radio and E-Bible for about the past 2 years now, and I've been blessed by it, and it's been awesome. So I want to thank you for that. Of course, Mr. Camping and you. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, great. I'm glad to hear that you're so young and listening.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I'm just blessed by God from that. But my question is, I was recently doing a study, and it was about Noah. How in the Bible it says how like the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. And of course, we've always related to that from one and everything. But I was recently studying. I forgot the number, but do you know how many days Noah was on the ark for?
Well, it could be 370, but there's some debate about that. If we can know exactly the number of days, some people think it was close to an exact year, but it could be 370.
Oh, because I was thinking maybe, we're on the ark, and that's how should we be living, how we're, life on the ark. So, that's how should we be living until he comes and until he comes and actually takes us off the ark.
Well, you're correct in the spiritual sense, because the ark represents Christ and deliverance, and so all the elect are in the ark, and we've been delivered. The flood or the judgment of God isn't going to harm us at all, and during this period of time, God is He's working on us, but we can't look to the literal number of days, because we've passed that period that we read about in Genesis. It's now been a year and a couple of months, excuse me, since 21, and we've gone beyond any possibility of matching the actual length of time that Noah and his family were on the ark.
All right, I've been studying and seeing that, but because also he didn't know when he was going to get off the ark, so you think maybe that's how we're going to be, and how we just have to live on the ark, and we don't know when he's going to come, but but we know that he is going to come. Is that maybe we should live like that, or?
Well, we don't know right now, and we know that we know a lot actually of what God is doing. But one thing we don't know right now is how long this time will be, the duration. But I wouldn't say we'll never know, or God wouldn't open up more to us as we go along. And, that has been His pattern, to reveal things as we've gone along into them. He did that during the Great Tribulation, and it could be that we learn more exactly about how long we'll be here. Excuse me.
I see. Because I've been reading how it's imagine like being on the ark. It's it's pretty hard just being in just in the ark, and that's how how spiritually we're on the ark, and it's going to be harsh for us, just like how it was harsh for Noah and the other and his family that were on the ark. Imagine just being in a 370 days. And what I mean, it's like it's hard.
Yeah.
So just like that, it's going to be harsh for us, but I guess we just have to endure to the end, just like he says.
Well, yeah, that actually is a good point to think about, and it's probably worth looking further into to seeing if we can learn anything from Noah's time on the ark. But we can know this, that ark was a means of safety and of refuge and of deliverance and of salvation, and so in that sense we are in the ark. We're in Christ. It's the same picture, by the way, in Matthew 25 when the bride or the 10 virgins are told to go out to meet the bridegroom, and then it says in verse 10, and while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. So here we have the elect, the wise virgins, going in to, it doesn't say where in this verse, but just that they went in to him or with him to the marriage or wedding, and the door was shut, just as Noah went into the ark and the door was shut. But back in Isaiah, God gives us a little bit more insight into that verse in Matthew 25:10. In verse 20 of Isaiah 26, it says, "Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers." And a chamber would be like a bedroom where the virgin bride would be taken into, "and shut thy doors about thee." So here we have some of the same elements of Matthew 24:10. The believers, God's people, enter in, and the door is shut. And then it says, "Hide thyself, as it were, for a little moment." Now, to hide yourself, Colossians 3:3 says, "You're dead, your life is hid with Christ in God." It indicates salvation. And that's why Zephaniah 2, the cry was to hide, that you might be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. And that is to become saved, to be a child of God. So these individuals, the company of the elect, are in a place of safety here in Isaiah 26. They're hiding themselves for a little moment until the indignation be overpassed. So here, again, this is another verse, like Isaiah 24:6, which speaks of the inhabitants of the earth being burned and few men left. Here God is pouring out his wrath, his indignation, and he's hiding his people in a place of safety and refuge, much like he hid Noah and his family in the ark, until the fierce anger of God be done. And then notice in verse 21, "For behold, Jehovah cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain." So we do have this insight at this time, similar to what God did to Noah, where he brought him into a place of safety, he shut the door, and then he poured out his wrath on the world with the flood. And now God has done that spiritually with all of his people.
Yeah,
so
I see that.
Yeah, thank you for your comments and your, the verses you brought up. about Noah. And let's go to the next person on the phones. Welcome to eBible's Question and Answer.
Bonson 17:2 asks, in regards to 1 Corinthians 3 verse 15, where it mentions, if any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss. Could this compare to a person who is not saved, that was out on a track trip doing this in his own power so that he might be saved?
Well, when it's talking here about men's work, let's see, if we go back to verse 9, it says, for we are laborers together with God. You're God's husbandry, you're God's building. And the Apostle Paul is then speaking of the foundation and building upon that foundation. But notice that we are laborers together with God. We work with Him. When God sent forth the gospel into the world, how did it get there? Through His people. You know, there's two verses, one in the Old Testament, I think it's Isaiah, I might be wrong, and another I think in Romans. I might be wrong about both of them, but you'll recognize the verse. And one, it says, how beautiful are the feet of them that bring glad tidings of good news, or something like that. In the other place it says, how beautiful are the feet of Him. So in one case it is Christ in view, and in an identical verse, except for this part, in the other case it is them, the body of believers. Because we are doing the will of God, He is moving in us to will and do of His good pleasure. And so God sent forth the gospel, His people carried it. That is the work that we labored together with God. And so now God is speaking of this foundation and everything that is laid upon it. And it is the result of the work of the people of God. And it relates to a track trip because God's people went out and shared the gospel with, maybe you handed out 5,000 tracts or 10,000 tracts, or maybe over the years you've handed out 500,000 tracts. Some people are very, very diligent, and they've been at it for a long time. And so they shared the gospel. They labored together with God. Well, every man's work shall be made manifest, and it will be revealed by fire. And in some cases, individuals did become saved as a result of hearing the gospel through the work of God's people. Maybe it was, you know, it could be through the ministry of family radio, as all the elect banded together to support that ministry, and someone over here and over there and everywhere, people heard it, and some became saved. So they abide the fire, and yet many who heard the ministry or the gospel going out did not become saved, and they will be burned up in this fire. And I think that's what's in view with this language in 1 Corinthians 3. Excuse me. Okay, do we have any other questions? We have time for one more. Anything else from Pal Talk?
Yes. Frank A. Sailor 1 asks, with all this we are going through, how are we to relate to our spouses? Are we to just not talk about it? Because there is no question in their mind that they are being judged by the fact that we are not going to church a whole year after.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Excuse me. I'm not sure of everyone has a different situation with their spouse, or with their families and friends. Excuse me. And I would just pray for wisdom towards everyone in our life. That's a good way to start the day, or to end the day, is to pray for everyone in our family and to pray to God for wisdom towards our wife or husband or children and neighbors and everyone else. So Lord, grant me wisdom toward this person or this situation. We know pretty much the things that are in our life and the things that trouble us, and in this case, if someone has a wife who doesn't want to hear anything, well, you can pray about that. Or if you have a wife who's in the church and feels judged because you're not going to church, you can pray about that, but the believer would still gently want to say, I'm sorry, but I cannot go to church. I can never go to church. God is not in the churches. He is left there. Now, by the way, speaking of church, we now know the Great Tribulation is over. The judgment is over upon the church. It was a 23-year period. So someone might be wondering, well, maybe I can go back to church. No, the judgment has gone from one fire to another. Read in Ezekiel 15, and there's no blessing at all in any church, and it's a place that's still under the judgment of God. When God cursed the fig tree, it was forever cursed, and just like someone would not want to go to a synagogue, even though God divorced Israel back in the 1st century, you still would not want to go to a synagogue today. Neither would you want to go into any church. There's absolutely no purpose for it. Now, we can avoid going to church, but we cannot avoid being in the world. And the world is under judgment, but there's no place for us to go. But it's certainly no excuse to return to a church, into a place that is so much under the displeasure of God and the wrath of God, where it's been burned once already and it's currently in a second fire. That's the last place we would ever want to go. But thank you for your question. I would like to thank everyone for sharing your comments and your questions today. Lord willing, and we'll continue in the study of 1 Samuel each night, 9 to 9:30. The next Friday evening, after the Bible study in 1 Samuel, Lord willing, at 9:30 we'll have another question and answer. But for now, I'm going to say good afternoon, and Michael will come back on to inform us of the next thing that's going to happen. I think we're going to have some more scripture reading and maybe another hymn. But thank you for being with us in our Sunday afternoon fellowship.